Sudan is once again at the center of international attention, as political division, racial tension, and unresolved historical wounds continue to shape the present. In the last days of October 2025, the world was shocked by the news spreading from Sudan. The satellite images made us unable to stop discussing, are we in the modern century or ancient times? Many questions arise, many questions are questioned. Is it true or is it just a mistake because we cannot believe it is true? From here, we will look back to the past history of the country and people of Sudan. Once home to the ancient kingdom of Kush, a major regional power in Northeast Africa, Sudan today faces deep internal fractures. Long-standing discrimination between North and South has driven communities apart, and many citizens now openly call separation inevitable. In the South, a new national identity is already forming. Even a national anthem has been written at Juba University. Despite isolated voices calling for unity, including educators who support coexistence, polarization dominates public sentiment. Khartoum remains a modern economic hub, but surrounding slums such as Mandela and Mayo tell another reality. Displacement, inequality, and resentment. Millions have been uprooted over decades of conflict, and the country approaches a decisive moment. A referendum that could formally divide Sudan into two states. The key question now, can stability be achieved, and at what cost to national identity? Is a tragic irony. Sudan once stood as the land of opportunity. The legacy of Kush, a civilization whose pyramids and kings rivaled Egypt, a land once feared and respected. But history has not been kind. Decades of marginalization and racial hierarchy have carved deep wounds. Many in the North no longer see the South as equal. Dignity and identity were stolen before borders were drawn. And now we have reached a moment that history books warned us about. A nation so polarized that separation became not just an idea, but a necessity. Southern Sudan began composing its own national anthem, a song born from ancient Kush and modern pain. Hope written by hands of youth, yet supervised by a northern Arab professor who refuses to hate. Proof that some still believe in a Sudan larger than tribe, language, or skin. Here, Christians, Muslims, and those in between exist side by side. Every tribe with its own culture, yet part of one human mosaic. But his voice is the exception. More than 2.5 million have died. Millions displaced. Khartoum's skyscrapers shine, but around them is the Black Belt. Mandela slum, Mayo, and dozens of forgotten edges, where war survivors wait in houses that never became homes. Some say, in the South we have no jobs, but at least we have land. In Khartoum we breathe, but only temporarily. And now trucks arrive. Families are packing. Some go back because peace called. Others because humiliation became unbearable, like Deborah, tired of the word ABD slave. We are Sudanese, raised in the same sun on the same soil, and yet history has repeated its darkest chapter. The referendum will decide borders. But the deeper question is not map lines, it is this. Will Sudan finally honor the richness of its own people? Or will another ancient civilization become just a memory buried under sand? Once more, and across the country, every means of transport is being used in what has become a mass migration. An exodus of perhaps as many as 1 million people, leaving for what most believe will be a better life in an independent homeland. The first great exodus wasn't voluntary. Black slaves taken north by mainly Egyptian and Turkish traders. The opening of the South gave the slave traders access to southern Sudan, where they were able to cause havoc and devastate villages through trading in human beings. This is the Sud, one of the world's largest swamps, covering up to 40,000 square kilometers around the border area between northern and southern Sudan. For thousands of years, grasses and rafts of water hyacinths and papyrus had merged to form a shifting labyrinth of channels, a natural barrier to any boat attempting to navigate the Nile. It wasn't until 1839 that an Egyptian-sponsored expedition finally broke through, and the slave trade mushroomed. It opened the southern Sudan to slave traders. Traders were after ivory, gold, and human stock. Sadiq al-Mahdi was the last democratically elected prime minister of the Sudan. The slave trade is a matter of tragic history, and it is something that represents a dark aspect of past humanity. But what we need to apologize for is the association in the North, in our culture in the North, between blackness and slavery. As Northerners, we should apologize for this association between color and slavery. In the late 19th century, Sadiq al-Mahdi's great-grandfather had conquered Sudan in the modern world's first Islamic revolution. In the final battle, the British Governor-General Charles Gordon was killed. But soon the British returned in force, and in partnership with Egypt, effectively ruled the country until independence in 1956. People were relieved that at last they were going to have their country for themselves. They were on their own affairs, and they were more or less united in their feelings of togetherness and readiness to build the future of the Sudan. When the British left, they left a democratically elected government. The Ferris government was elected in 1954, that government who opted for independence. The British left an independent and strong civil service. They did leave good civil service in the Sudan. Even the Sudan Defense Force was very efficient, but mainly for the north. They did very little in the south. Out of 800 civil service posts vacated by the British, just 4 were given to Southerners. But even before independence, the signs were clear that the South was uneasy with a Northern-dominated administration. The trouble between North and South started in August 1955. Joseph Lagu, who became one of Southern Sudan's most famous rebel leaders, remembers the first shot fired in what eventually led to 50 years of conflict. A company of Southern soldiers refused orders from their Northern officer, who then shot one of them in the arm as a warning to obey. That initial shot made the soldiers to disperse from their disorderly. They went into the arms store, broke the arms store, took weapons, and then started shooting their Northern commanders that they could get hold of. And after finishing off with them, they went into the town and then started killing any Northern Sudanese they can find. Even today, many Arab shopkeepers living in the South are fearful of what might happen should Southerners vote to break away. Abu Qassam Babakir has watched with growing concern in recent months as friends have abandoned their stores to return north. He now plans to leave himself, uncertain whether he will ever return. Of course I will come back. If there is peace, I will come back. But if there is no peace, I will not come back. Others are determined to stay. I came to work here in the South. The South and Sudan are one. Sudan is one, not two. Here in the South I have a homeland, I have a big one. If I die, they will leave me here. I don't want that. The seeds of the North-South divide had been sown long before Sudan itself had gained independence. It is the British to blame because they wanted the South to be a separate country. In 1922, the British colonial masters had created a time bomb for regional and religious conflict by restricting the movement of Northerners south of the 10th parallel and of Southerners above the 8th. The result was a country split in two. And that was a great mistake. They should have allowed the intercourse, the social and cultural intercourse between the North and South to develop naturally. They didn't. They disrupted it. They thought that the South was a cultural vacuum. It should be filled with Christianity. Under British rule, the Christian faith flourished in southern Sudan. The British were trying to get rid of the Islamic influences in the South. They wanted southern Sudanese to be converted to Christianity by allowing the missionaries to operate in southern Sudan. They just didn't want northerners to spread Islam. Islam was developing fast there. So it was obvious that their motive was to stop Muslims from being there to spread Islam, especially that Muslims at the time were very, very devout Muslims. They resist the Spirit of God. They resist all the good things that the Lord does in the lives of the nation. Come, Heavenly Father. Christian missionaries flocked to the south, determined to take advantage. The traditional tribal religions were marginalized. Sudan was now on the front line in the struggle between the world's two biggest religions. Within just 2 years of independence, the new government faced a vote of no confidence in parliament. The then Prime Minister Abdullah Khalil negotiated a handover of power to the military. He invited General Ibrahim Abid, to take over power. Abid, 1958, just 2 years after independence, is very rare that a country that has been fighting for independence for years and years and years, and then immediately after independence is taken away from them by the military. It's very, very rare. It was a handover to the military. So began a cycle of short bursts of democracy, followed by military dictatorships that has lasted to the present day. General Abid himself was overthrown 6 years after taking power, making way for civilian rule. We lived through a very special period, what we call today the Golden Era in Sudan. Omar El Fadli rarely ventures over the threshold of a world he has created from a time gone by, a time when Khartoum was a very different city. General Abid was gone, and by the late 60s and early 70s, the capital city had become a magnet for those seeking a sense of freedom. Khartoum was the Beirut of Africa, or was the Paris of Africa even. As Beirut used to claim that they used to be the Paris of the Middle East, we believe that Khartoum was also, at that time, in the way of having an open market, as I said, latest in the Middle East, products from London, from New York, from Paris, you can find it right in the street. But also culture, entertainment, the freedom of having parties, wedding parties, all through the night if you wish. I mean, everything was just a normal, happy life, to be honest with you. Despite restrictions, the leading members of the band have continued to play small venues in Khartoum since the 1960s. Those people have been through so much because of the political changes. So this country has been through so much, anti-culture, anti-music, anti-arts, anti-solo. And then you have the curfews for so many years, and then you have the closure of all the entertainment places, and they're still playing. There is a big gap between our generation and the new generation today. We don't speak the same language. When we talk about democracy and freedom, what is democracy and what's freedom? In fact, they say, hasn't democracy failed in this country? Do we need freedom? But the freedoms enjoyed by the rich youth of Khartoum in those days were a world away from the realities of poverty and conflict elsewhere in the country. A war had begun years earlier in the south. We started action exactly on 19th of September 1963. We started with our bare hands. I myself entered the bush with a machete in my hand. I had no gun. I had 3 old guns which I gave to my company commanders. I organized the guerrilla army and called it Enyanya. Enyanya is the name of a poison which is used by some tribes, including my own Madi tribe, and it is a deadly poison. If it touches you or it is given to you in water or in food, there is no medicine for it. The Enyanya rebellion became a civil war lasting almost 9 years and brought Joseph Lagu into direct confrontation with an old army colleague, Jaffer Numeri, who led a military coup in 1969. I knew him since 1960 here in Juba. As he took power in Khartoum, I found myself also in charge of the movement in the bush. And when the effect of our fighting was biting and so forth, he made a pronouncement, one of his main pronouncements, that South Sudan is a distinct region of the Sudan and the people living there have their right to self-rule. I said, if someone has recognized what I am fighting for, then what is now left is to seek a way to have meaningful dialogue with him. A peace accord was signed in 1972 in Addis Ababa. It gave the South autonomy in everything except national matters such as defense and foreign affairs. Joseph Lagu became vice president and 10 years of relative peace followed, the longest in modern Sudanese history. But unknown to the general public, a quiet revolution which had started in the corridors and debating societies of Khartoum University in the early 60s was beginning to wield influence in political circles. The key figure to emerge was a man who would eventually pull the country onto a path of strict Islamic principles, who would orchestrate military coups and who is blamed by many in the South for creating laws which led to the Second Civil War in which over 1 million people died. His name, Hassan al-Turabi. The Tabibi family has been crafting precious metals in northern Sudan for over 500 years. Is this the situation we are in now? Like the Tabibis, the Sudanese have a reputation for friendliness and tolerance. But the country's constitution, based on a localized interpretation of Sharia law, is less tolerant. It redefines the role of religion and politics, and the chief author of the Sudanese version of what they call political Islam is Hassan al-Turabi. He first came to prominence as a student leader coordinating street protests which led to the overthrow of the Abid military government in 1964. Civilian government lasted just 5 years before being replaced in another military coup which brought the left-wing Colonel Jaffer Numeri to power. Turabi was imprisoned and then sent into exile. Over the years that followed, Numeri swung from initially being aligned to the communists through Arab nationalism to Pan-Africanism, and finally in the late 1970s, sensing a mood change in the country, he began to embrace political Islam. When he saw that the Islamic fundamentalists were a political factor, he changed into Islamic fundamentalism. He was that sort of man. Numeri played the populist card by turning strongly towards political Islam. Oh yes, he did. And he was, of course, very jealous of us. He did not want Islam to be related to us because we were the only ones who were campaigning in the cause of Islam. Numeri invited Turabi back to Khartoum and appointed him to the powerful post of Attorney General. They then set about dismantling the Addis Ababa Agreement which had granted the South autonomy. It was at this point that John Garang, a protege of Joseph Lagu from the Enyanya days and now a senior officer in the Sudanese armed forces, began plotting a southern rebellion. In May 1983, in Garang's hometown of Bor, soldiers mutinied, refusing to obey orders from their northern commanders. Numeri sent troops to crush the revolt. It was the opportunity Garang had been waiting for. Numeri foolishly ordered the attack of Bor garrison. Despite my personal warning that don't. If you light fire, it will spread like bushfire and you will not be able to quench it. Leave those people alone. In the face of attack from a large force of northern Sudanese, Garang joined the mutineers and led them into the bush to start a guerrilla movement. These are some of the survivors that left Bor to form the Sudan People's Liberation Army, the SPLA. Although the first few months of the SPLA were marked by infighting amongst its leaders, a decision taken in Khartoum would soon unite the warring factions. Tarabi played with the minds of the foolish military rulers. He made them to do for him what he could not do alone. In September 1983, with Tarabi at its core, the Numeri regime introduced a strict interpretation of Sharia law, which included punishments of limb amputation for crimes such as theft, stoning to death of women for adultery, and a ban on alcohol consumption. Do you accept that the introduction of the September laws struck fear through the South? I think it was only used as propaganda and struck fear thereafter. But it wasn't actually application because bars were open all the time in Juba. Those days I'm quite sure about that. I went to Juba myself with Jennifer Lego. But security people sometimes, if they think you are subverting the public order for any reason, they might be as zealous, Islamically oriented like the Salafists, like the jihadists all over the world. When Numeri declared the Islamic Sharia, Tarabi said what would have taken us 100 years to achieve, he did it by a stroke of the pen. Even among northern Muslims, there was anger, particularly at what they saw as Tarabi's manipulation of the fundamentals of Islam. The September laws would turn what was a small rebellion occurring in the South into a full-scale civil war lasting over 2 decades. It immediately became clear that they pitted the country against each other. And it is what made the people of southern Sudan swell the ranks of the SPLM. The border town of Malakal witnessed some of the worst fighting. It was terrible. People lie under the beds. When you hear the sounds of the heavy artillery, nobody moves on the road. Even in the house, nobody moves around. You just lie down under the beds. People are just frightened. Even when people live there under the bed, you are shaking when you're shivering. Death can come at any time. Yes, some people died. Even near in front of my house, there were some people who were shot. Then they lay there for 2 or 3 days, nobody to touch them. At that time, you cannot walk. You just stay in your place. Until the time when the dead bodies are collected, and then you see some police walking on the road, then that will be the time that you can come out. 300 kilometers northwest of Malakal lie the Nuba Mountains. The people here are a mixture of Christians, Muslims, and traditional African religions. The war affected them all. One of them lifted me up and told me to get up. I saw that people were killed in front of me. If you don't die today, you won't die. Hope of an end to conflict came in 1985. A general strike and mounting public anger led to President Numeri being overthrown while on a visit to the United States. Military rule was eventually replaced by a coalition civilian government headed by Sadiq al-Mahdi. But it wouldn't be long before rumors of yet another coup emerged. I thought that a country with civil war, a country with conflict all over, a country with tension with its neighbors, no one would want to step into this. Hell. He had reckoned without the ambition of Brigadier Omar al-Bashir. In September 1989, just as al-Mahdi was about to clinch an historic peace agreement with the SPLA, the military made their move. The idea was that we'll meet on the 18th of September to clinch this. And one of the reasons for the coup was that they thought this was a conspiracy against Islam. Unknown to al-Mahdi, it was his own brother-in-law, Hassan al-Turabi, who was behind the coup. They were our soldiers, actually. And most of the people dressed, they were not even soldiers at first. But later on, we allowed a few officers to take over. So you controlled it? We controlled it. In the days leading up to the coup, Joseph Lagu received a warning to get out of the country. This former rebel leader was tipped off that the democratically elected government of Almaty was about to be overthrown. I was tipped by Turabi that there was going to be problem and that I should get away from the Sudan. Turabi gave you advance notice. Yes. Effectively of a coup d'etat. And you did nothing about it? You did nothing about it? What can I do about it? Make it public. Why should I make it public? Why should I make it public? He gave me a hand. He says, something is going to happen. Better get away. As for Turabi's brother-in-law, Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi, there was no warning. What did your brother-in-law say to you? Unfortunately, he was on very bad terms with me. He thought I was just taking power from him. And those days I was still on. I was not in office necessarily, but he knew that it's our movement, and I am the leader of that movement. In the south, John Garang soon faced a rebellion of his own when the SPLA leadership split along tribal lines. The movement was split into two, and then they launched an all-out war in Bor area, home of Dr. John, of course, possibly trying to strip him of his support. Garang was from the Dinka tribe, and most of the attackers came from a rival tribe, the Nuer. They abducted also a number of children and girls and women. There was a massacre, a massacring of people. Thousands of people died, and it was total destruction, and the whole area was left deserted, no man's area. So it was a very terrible situation. Bishop Samuel Garang and local chief Enoch Deng raced to the town when they heard the news. It took 13 days for the bishop to find his own family. I found the people down, those dead people on the road everywhere. And then I ran for my children. Thank God I went and I found them in the bush. With their mother, and little food which was with them. There was water and they spent 13 days. The current vice president of southern Sudan has been accused of orchestrating the Bor attacks to destabilize John Garang, an accusation he denies. In the midst of confusion, people died. Actually, it's fair to say that most of the attackers were from the Nubar tribe, your tribe. Yes. Were you involved in instigating this in any way at all? I would have no reason to instigate. Garang now had to fight a civil war within the SPLA and continue to battle the Northern Army. President Bashir, on the other hand, experienced a golden period as the 20th century came to a close. Oil had been discovered in the border regions, boosting the Sudanese economy. Khartoum began to transform itself into a modern metropolis and his popularity soared. But as Bashir's star rose, Hassan al-Jarabi's influence declined and soon he became a marginalized figure on the political wings. The discovery of oil has brought its own problems because 80% of the reserves are in the south and the pipeline goes north. And in the oil-rich region of Abyei, there's a dangerous territorial dispute that could explode at any moment. We don't have a car. We don't have a place to live. When we go out in the summer, we say, when the summer comes, we'll leave the car here. We say, we'll leave the car here, but we don't have a place to live. These are the Mizraia, a nomadic tribe of Arab origin. For at least 300 years during the dry season, they have left their grazing lands in the north to travel southwards to the place they call the Sea of Arabs. On their way, they must pass through the Abyei region, inhabited by the mainly Christian Dinka Nok tribe. Time and again, the region has been devastated by fighting, which the local population claims is the work of Mizraia militias, armed by the government. I have seen the whole area was burned down. Even those buildings you are seeing, they have just been rebuilt. They were not there. The whole thing has been destroyed at all and people moved towards South Abyei. But the Miseria chief denies that his people are responsible. To turn over the picture that the Miseria are bad people, the Miseria are hostile, the Miseria are very violent. Yes, we are not like this. I confirm to you that, till this moment, we want to live in coexistence and peace with our brothers Nok. Till this moment, yes. After intense negotiations, in 2005, President Omar al-Bashir and SPLM leader John Garang brought 22 years of civil war to an end by signing the historic Comprehensive Peace Agreement at a ceremony in Naivasha in neighboring Kenya. Two key articles of the agreement were for a referendum to be held throughout southern Sudan on independence, and a simultaneous referendum in Abyei, where the population will be allowed to vote on whether to be in the north or the south. There's little doubt that Dink and Nok favor the south. This is something that will be decided by the people. The core right to self-determination is people's right. So it is the people of Abyei who are going to determine what course of action to take thereafter. But the Abyei ballot was abandoned amid protests that the rights of the Miseria, who had no vote, were being ignored. I think Abyei was the mistake committed by the government negotiators in the Naivasha process. The Abyei region belongs to both the Miseria and Dinka. According to the SPLM, it's only the Dinka which, in my view, is a racist. These people have depended on their cattle for hundreds of years. You need water, not oil, for your cattle to drink. The Miseria drinks water, but the government drinks oil. Even if they hide it, we know what they are after. Failure to find agreement between the Dinka and the Miseria could provide the spark for an all-out war. If Dinka and Nok say that they will not permit the Miseria to reach the waters, I tell you, we will fight them. We will fight them. We will fight them. And we will go through even beyond Abyei to drink water and to take part. In Omar El Fadli's restaurant in Khartoum, Darfurian performer Omar Aces sings of peace and unity in his troubled homeland. The United Nations says up to 300,000 people have died in Darfur and 2.7 million have fled their homes. President Bashir, who puts the death toll at far fewer, just 10,000, has had an arrest warrant issued against him by the International Criminal Court on charges of war crimes. It's all a far cry from those heady days in 2005 when he and John Garang had joined together in peace. In the Nuba Mountains near the border between North and South, they still sing of that historic moment. But in a mausoleum in Juba, southern Sudan, lie the remains of John Garang, killed in a helicopter crash just 6 months after signing the peace agreement and 3 weeks after over 1 million people had welcomed him to Khartoum. Garang came with the idea that Sudan should remain united. And he believed in that. Till he died, he believed in that. And he looked at Sudan as a country, that has a role to play. It is a linchpin of the whole continent. Even his enemies knew that here was a man who had attempted to cross the divide that was Sudan. He was a true leader. He inspired people around him. He was a towering figure. And I could see that even from my position on the other camp because he was always an enemy. But no one could miss his leadership character and his abilities. It was a great loss, not for the SPLM, not for the South, but for the Sudan and for Africa. Sudan was the giant of Africa, a great experiment to discover whether different religions and cultures could coexist together. Instead, it has become the land of broken dreams. Today, Sudan stands at a critical crossroad, a nation shaped by history, yet deeply challenged by its present. In October 2025, international observers recorded a sharp escalation of the crisis in Darfur. Latest briefings from the United Nations describe the humanitarian situation as one of the most serious in the region. Large-scale displacement, widespread insecurity, and communities losing access to basic services. Aid groups report urgent needs in West Darfur and El Fasher, with many families on the move once again. Political responsibility remains heavily disputed. Sudan's national institutions are fragmented. Authority is divided between different forces, and local administrative structures struggle to operate consistently. Meanwhile, regional organizations are calling for renewed diplomacy, safe corridors for humanitarian access, and a neutral negotiation table. Assessment: where Sudan stands now. Sudan is no longer a single, unified political arena. It has become a patchwork of competing control zones. Central authorities in Port Sudan. Armed actors across parts of Darfur and Kordofan. Local councils managing day-to-day life in isolated communities. Analysts say Sudan is shifting from a post-conflict transition to a multi-center political environment, with no single national roadmap. And this is the greatest contrast with the era of John Garang. He believed Sudan could be a continental hinge, the place where Africa proved that many identities could live under one national idea. But instead of that shared experiment, we now see a landscape defined by uncertainty, separation pressures, and competing futures. The unanswered question remains: can Sudan find a stable model of governance that respects its cultural diversity, or will new borders be the only way to build peace?